And what's up? Welcome in. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark alongside me. This is GC Live, our final preview show for South Carolina versus Georgia. Also our Friday live show, but I like to sort of think of this show as our final thoughts before the matchup. So if you don't listen to this or watch it on Friday, hopefully a good option for you while you're getting ready for the game on Saturday or maybe even driving down to Athens. I know that's a popular trip for a lot of Gamecock fans as we get ready for this South Carolina UGA matchup. 7 p.m. ESPN, Chris. And I guess we're at the point, the hay is almost in the barn. The hay is in the barn as far as South Carolina is concerned. It's about to be in the barn for GC Live as we sort of give our final breakdown of this thing. But first, got to tell everybody about our good friend Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network. ClintHammond.com is where you can find more information about Clint. 803-771-6933. Or you can just shoot Clint an email, chammond@mortgagenetwork.com. The NMLS number is 71597. And again, as we always tell you, we're not forcing you to buy a house, but if you're in that market to buy a house, we just want you to give Clint a shot because I promise you he will earn your business. Or maybe you've just been thinking about refinancing, want to know what your options are. Clint can walk you through that process as well. And we certainly appreciate our buddy Clint for being our presenting sponsor here on GC Live. Clint, I'm sure, will be sitting somewhere watching the Gamecocks play Georgia this Saturday night. And to this point, Chris, this season has kind of gone as expected. I think so far, if you told me week 3, give your predictions for South Carolina, I would have told you South Carolina would have won week 1 probably handily. I would have told you they would win week 2 by about 10 points. Didn't quite get to that point, a little bit closer, obviously, than maybe a lot of people wanted or thought it would be. And then I would have told you South Carolina would lose to Georgia and go into Kentucky, with Kentucky being a massive, massive football game for this season and for this program. So now we go into this Georgia game. South Carolina can at least say they have taken care of what they needed to do in the first 2 games. Now they have this opportunity ahead of them for a monumental upset against Georgia. Where is your head? I mean, I know we've talked about it all week long, man. There's no question that Georgia is going to be a more talented football team than South Carolina. That's not, if 2021 South Carolina plays 2021 Georgia 10 times, Georgia's winning most of those games. I don't know what the number would be, but all it takes is that one. So where is your head at as we have gathered as much information as we possibly can on this football game?
Well, and that was kind of the lead into my keys to the game, Wes, that we're publishing today on Gamecock Central, breaking down the keys every week. Wes gives his take, I give my take on what South Carolina has to do to win. If you want to go check that out in full. But the lead here's kind of what I said, a paraphrase version of, Georgia is going to be favored and have more talent than any team they play on their regular season schedule, right? Like Clemson's a very talented team. In my opinion, Georgia's got more talent top to bottom than Clemson does on their roster, right? Which is saying something because we know how they built their roster up. So to say South Carolina's walking into this game at a talent and depth disadvantage, it's not an insult to South Carolina. It's just kind of reality. And so where does that leave us? Well, Wes, I think where that leaves things is exactly what you said. You take a 10-game sample, and that's kind of how you break down teams, right? Like, would one team win 5 of them and another team would win 5 if you played 10 of them? This Georgia team, like you said, they win probably almost all of them. But is there a sliver in there, or how is that sliver, how does that happen for South Carolina? And so I think it is, look, you don't play the games on paper. If you did, Georgia's probably running the table this season. You don't, right? So you go line up, you play this game. I think South Carolina, the biggest thing, the number one thing, I go back to turnover margin. That's the great equalizer when one team is at a disadvantage from a talent standpoint. And South Carolina has some parts, defensive line is the one I go to. Running backs, they have talent there. They have legitimate, Georgia level talent there, in my opinion. But the other spots, there are more questions. And so that leaves things of, what's South Carolina's in? I go back to turnover margin. Now, some of that is how the other team plays. Some of it's out of your control. Some of it is in your control. Can you force turnovers? Can you take advantage of them, when they're presented to you? And that's what we saw in Athens a couple of years ago, right? We saw turnovers playing a huge difference in that game. So I think that's where it leaves it. But again, I'm sure we'll get to our final predictions, final thoughts. I can't pick South Carolina to win this game. I think you go off what you've seen, what both teams have. Georgia is projected to win this game comfortably. And I think that's very fair based on what we've seen from these teams.
No doubt, man. And if South Carolina plays like they did last week, it's really not even a conversation, right?
That's right.
I think you look – Beamer keeps going back to the penalties, right? And to me, the penalties are just maybe are the penalties the actual issue, or are they like a symptom of some other things where I think it's just about playing a little bit more under control if you're South Carolina and not putting yourself in those situations? Because I've been wanting to make this point all week. I keep forgetting. In my opinion, I categorize penalties in sort of different ways. And generally, penalties, I remember South Carolina's previous staff mentioning this, penalties are not a direct indicator of if you're a good or successful football team or not. And the reason for that is that if you are not making any penalties at all, you're probably playing a little too conservative, as far as not conservative from a play calling standpoint necessarily, but if you're not getting a defensive pass interference every now and then, you're probably not close enough to the guy, right? If you're not getting a holding call every now and then, you're probably missing out on 10 opportunities where a hold would not have been called. So if a guy just has really tight coverage on somebody, Chris, and the ball is thrown his way and there's sort of a little fight for the ball and your guy gets called for defensive pass interference, you know what? Part of the game. I think the issue South Carolina has had and the killer penalties are when you have penalties that are post whistle or any type of dead ball, just like any type of procedural penalty where you're jumping off sides, you're false starting, you turn a 3rd and 2 into a 3rd and 7. Those are the type things that I believe South Carolina has got to eliminate really for the season, but certainly if you're going to have any chance at all to win this game. It's not just penalties like in a big picture standpoint. It's those specific penalties to me, man, because I don't think they're created equal. If you make a penalty because you're just playing aggressive and playing hard and you're trying to make a play, so be it. If you make a penalty and you give a team a first down because you hit somebody late out of bounds, which you've seen South Carolina do, or you go in the guy's face after you bat the ball away, which we've seen South Carolina do, those are the ones that are pretty much borderline inexcusable and that the staff, I believe, is saying they cannot tolerate at this point.
That's right. And you can. Particularly, we saw them play in the first 2 games. They were more noticeable against ECU because ECU is a better team than EIU. And any mistakes that may happen in the Georgia game that set them back, put them behind the 8 ball, are going to be magnified tenfold from ECU because of the level of competition, right? So when we talk about the margin of error, South Carolina has absolutely none in this game. They had plenty of margin for error against EIU. They had some against ECU, as we saw. They did nothing in the first half.
They used every last bit of their margin, though.
Yeah, right. They used it up. They did nothing, and then they were able to do enough, right? You play that poorly against Georgia offensively, especially, and you make that level of mistakes, those types of mistakes. The game isn't going to be close unless Georgia's also making that many mistakes, right? Then maybe. But that's not something you can count on. And I think for Shane Beamer, his recognition, Wes, is that they've done some of these things the first couple weeks. He certainly recognizes where they are on the schedule, not even just looking at Georgia, but Kentucky. And then, what lies ahead in the conference slate, plenty of conference opponents, which is obviously the meat of your schedule and going forward, a very important part of it. So lower margin, less margin for error. But here's the thing, Wes, and this is the problem, is that, now you're walking into a road game at night against a far superior opponent. So what you have to bank on, and this is, something the coaching staff is surely having to work on, is getting the guys to play more under control and get the offense turned around with some of the smaller procedural things, also bigger things like being more explosive against a great defense. And that does make it, more of a tall order.
So moving forward, man, first of all, I want to get to this question. Tyler on Facebook says, is Doty truly 100% healthy? I have no ideas why he wouldn't be starting if he was. No slight on Zeb, but Luke adds a whole different dynamic to the offense. Gives this team the best chance to win. And going forward, what is y'all's take? Good question, Tyler. Appreciate you throwing it out there. And so to answer that question, first and foremost, Chris, I think Doty is very, very close to 100% healthy. Like, he is getting there. There was soreness last week. If you listen to Beamer in Carolina calls, and based on what I've heard about the rotation this week in practice, it certainly seems like Zeb Nolan is starting again. To answer Tyler's question, and last week, Doty was – it sounded like Doty was like emergency quarterback last week, because Beamer did ultimately say that Doty could have played if they really needed him to. Doesn't seem like they were completely comfortable putting him out there yet. He's practiced a lot more this week. Chris, you've mentioned this earlier in the week. I think at this point, it's just as much about rust as anything, and getting Doty back comfortable, not just putting him out there, but putting him out there with a chance to succeed, putting him out there when he's had a full week of practice, putting him out there when he is in a position to outplay Zeb Nolan. I know Zeb has taken a little bit of heat from some of the fan base. He had some throws he definitely wants back from last week. But I don't know if Nolan has played as bad as some people want to say either. I think the staff is in a position right now where they're just trying to manage this situation the right way and not just put Doty out there because they can, but put Doty out there when he is ready to go perform at a high level.
Yeah, and broken record alert, but like you said, I've said it a few times this week, like there's a difference in your, okay, I'm physically ready to play in that, the foot's healed, it's better, it's fine, there's nothing structurally wrong, and also no soreness now, or very limited soreness, one or the other. There's a difference in that, and then being able to go out and take the entire Georgia game, right? Like there's a difference in that. And you got to keep in mind, Doty missed some of preseason camp at the end, injured going into that first game. So he's out, he's in a boot, you get out. Now it's about reacclimating to running, getting the stiffness out, all those things. You're not out there taking first team reps during that process. Then, the week leading up to ECU does more in practice, right? But he's still not out there leading team 11 on 11, first team, getting everything. He's not there. And so this past week leading up to Georgia, of course, as has been documented, he's done a lot more. Shane Beamer mentioning last night on Carolina calls that, he's out there in 11 on 11, all those things. But, again, you got to keep in mind the amount of practice time that he's either outright missed at the beginning of the injury or been limited in. And during that time, Zeb Nolan has gotten more. Luke Doty's still a young player. He played, what is it, Wes, 2.5 games last year? What do we always say?
Yeah.
Played none this year. He has not played this year. So he's still a very young player in a new offense. He went through spring, summer, some of preseason camp. But these are the types of things that you have to manage. So there is a difference in being ready to play. And that's why I think the signs and what we've heard and what has been said point more to maybe seeing both Marcus Satterfield has been up front with Luke Doty can handle the Dacarrion Joyner package. Maybe that's a good insertion point for him. So we'll see how it plays out. But it's not – I think the point we're trying to make, Wes, is it's not as simple as the foot is ready and he's not sore now, so now he's automatically ready to just go out there, and he's physically, mentally ready as well.
Yeah, and to me, it's about not just are you playing, but are you in a position to where he can play well and that he's ready. And, all that missed practice time, how much of a factor is it in this as well? I think the staff has been relatively happy with Zeb Nolan. Like, I don't think that's coach speak. I think they were impressed with the way he bounced back and made some big throws. Later, as that game wore on against East Carolina. So we'll see. And certainly it does. It feels like almost like a broken record. Like each week it's been who's going to be South Carolina starter at quarterback. It was pretty obvious it was Zeb last week. Then it was, or 2 weeks ago, the season opener, it was very obvious it was going to be Zeb. Then it seemed all week long like it was going to be Zeb last week as well. Seems like Zeb is the starter this week, but that Doty will have an opportunity to go play. So Chris, I went back, I watched that UAB game, Georgia UAB, and I think right now, if you look at the national thought right now is that Georgia is the number 2 team in the country. Like they're ranked the number 2 team in the country. Alabama will be the number 1 team until they do something to not be the number 1 team. But that's sort of, you look at some of the other teams. Clemson has lost, obviously, to Georgia. Ohio State has lost a game. There's not – it kind of feels like it's Alabama and Georgia at the top right now, and then a little gap as far as the perception that people have right now. Point I'm getting at is from a talent perspective, it makes sense. Georgia has done nothing to change anyone's mind yet about them being the number 2 team in the country. Well, we do sometimes get ahead of ourselves as far as taking a small sample size and sort of saying, oh, this team is what we think they were. So for me, I've tried to look at Georgia and go back over these last couple of games. They've played a Clemson team that we know is very talented, right? We know they're very talented. They've played a UAB team that, watching that game, honestly, from just a skill, like from an athletic size, speed, just ability to keep up athlete to athlete, UAB did not belong on the same field as Georgia. Like it was not even close. So they've played sort of 2 teams that are on either side of the spectrum. Well, Georgia's defense was dominant against both of those teams, against a talented Clemson offense and against a UAB offense that really couldn't do anything. That really only UAB scored a 4th quarter garbage time touchdown in this game. So I'm ready to say, we'll see what Georgia does against some elite offense if they face them at some point. But Georgia's defense, I have no doubt in my mind, they are who we think they are. Like they are a very good, very talented defense. Georgia's offense is going to be the difference in whether they truly win a national title or they have a couple of those Georgia games where they fall short and end up losing 2 games. Because to me, it was such a night and day difference between what they did against UAB and what they did against Clemson. UAB had a bunch of busts, guys not even close to, like, deep passes where the defender's not even in the same window. The interesting thing to me, though, is that the Georgia running game still has not gotten to the point that I thought they would be 2 weeks in. They played a bunch of backs against UAB. They averaged 4.3 yards per carry against a lesser opponent. That does not strike fear into people like a traditional Georgia rushing attack does. Zamir White had 34 yards rushing, I think, as the leading rusher in that game. So to me, Chris, we're going to find out quite a bit about South Carolina's defense this week. We're going to find out quite a bit about Georgia's offense this week. As far as is South Carolina's defense just benefited from playing a couple of not too good teams, or are they really that much improved under Clayton White so far?
And I think it can be some of both, right? Like you definitely have to adjust for competition level, but even just eye test, seeing the defensive line's movement, seeing their technique, seeing the fact that, look, we see every year, Wes, with the Gamecocks or other teams, DBs getting beat one-on-one, by a guy and giving up a big play, something like that. Not that that has not happened at all in the first couple games, but we kind of seen a little less of that, right? So I agree with you. That South Carolina's kind of trump card here of can the defense have just such a good performance? And we don't really know that because, again, Georgia against Clemson didn't do a whole lot, no offensive touchdowns, scored 10 points in the game. Touchdown was off a pick six. And we're not saying South Carolina's defense is going to rise to that level, but it does show maybe there's some questions there. Maybe that's an area that South Carolina can take advantage of. What may happen, Wes, is we exit this game. It's over. I could see Georgia winning this game and walking out and the takeaway being, and actually this is probably the most likely scenario, looking at it and saying South Carolina's defense played well, and Georgia's offense is still a question long-term for them. But South Carolina still lost the game because they couldn't get anything going offensively against Georgia. I think that's a scenario that very well could play out to where you look at it, South Carolina loses, everybody's disappointed, but the defense plays very well and holds up. Now, that, again, remember the example I gave yesterday, that doesn't always – like the scoreboard doesn't even always dictate how well the defense played depending on other parts of the game. I brought up the South Carolina game, 44-11 in the Swamp 2012. They gave up 150 yards defensively. Normally you hear that, you say, well, what'd they give up, 10 points or something? You gave up 44, just because of the other aspects on the defense there. But Wes, you're right. Man, looking back at that Clemson Georgia game, do you realize the rushing yards for Clemson? Do you remember that number?
Yeah, it was like 0.
It was 2. It had 2 rushing yards, and then total yards was 180. So they couldn't get anything going. And those rushing yards, not sack adjusted, but still, net, your final tally on rushing yards too, that 0.1 yards per rush was what it ended up being. And again, that's the Clemson team with a lot of talent. So it just shows you this defense for Georgia has capability to play, really, really well.
Yeah, and South Carolina, no doubt, has to play far better on offense than they have at all in the first 2 games. There's no question about that. They're going to have to – guys are going to have to step up. O-line's going to have to be better. They have to find room. I was doing 107.5 earlier today, and you know how Pearson likes to just throw random questions at you that you don't know how to answer half the time. Like you have to think about. The one today – Wes, who has the better defensive line, Clemson or South Carolina, and how much better is the one that's better? And I'm like, dude, how do you even answer that? But so the other one, and this wasn't one of Pearson's completely out of the planet questions, but I literally my answer was I have no idea. And Kendall and I were actually talking about this on our pre-recorded game day video that will be out tomorrow. Who is South Carolina's best running back?
Oh. Uh-oh. Wes.
I know I'm going to get myself in trouble, but no, but my answer was I have no idea. Because and then in our game day show, the question was last week it was Juju McDowell who ended up getting the ball in crunch time. None of you, myself included, Chris included, no one else in the media, no one else on this chat, no one else listening would have predicted prior to the season that Juju McDowell was getting the ball with the game on the line. So who's South Carolina's guy tomorrow is my question. And are we going to see it change? Could it depend on the opponent? Could it just depend on who's having a great day? Could it sometimes depend on the luck of who happens to be in the game when the O-line creates a little bit more room? So I don't know if you want to try to answer that question or not, man, but is that question answerable at this time?
No, not this year. Not based on what we've seen so far. Kevin Harris missed the first game. He was limited in the second game in terms of carries, right? There were no snap limitations or anything like that. And we saw 4 backs play. And the running game has not gotten on the rails yet for South Carolina. Will it? I don't know. This is a tough game to get it going, obviously. This is a Georgia team who just held a team to 2 rushing yards. So I don't know if this week will answer it. At some point during this season, I think we'll have a better idea, whatever metric that ends up being. It may end up being, well, who has the most yards? It may be an argument of, well, this guy ended up having the most yards, but this guy made the most big plays or most important plays. I think right now, Wes, to be kind of fair with it, I think you have to say it's Kevin because he's proven it the most with the season that he had last year. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that'll be the case this year. We've seen some teams that have carried 2, sometimes 3 backs. I'm not necessarily talking about South Carolina, that it's been, like you've said, a game-to-game, type of thing to where, let's use Georgia as an example. Some games it's Sony Michel that ended up annihilating people. Sometimes it's Nick Chubb. It just kind of depends. Wes, since we're on rushing, go ahead with your next point if you got one because I don't want to talk too long. I do have a stat of the day.
Ooh, okay.
Sponsored by Gamecock Russ. Not sponsored by him, but it's our Gamecock Russ stat of the day. And it does relate to rushing. And it's kind of I want to put it out there as kind of a trivia question. There we go. For those of you on the stream.
It's stat of the week, not just the stat of the day, Chris.
Yes, so this is a stat of the week. It's that important. Shout out to Gamecock Russ. We miss you, man. So, Wes, when and put your answer in the chat if you want. When do you think the last time South Carolina had a 100-yard or more rusher against Georgia was? Stat of the week. You're muted.
I can't believe I did that.
Somebody had to do it.
It's been years for me. 100-yard rusher for South Carolina
against Georgia, obviously.
Against Georgia. Jonathan says 2011. Mark says 2013. Oh God.
Y'all are looking it up.
Do what?
They're looking it up.
Yeah. You have to do it within 2013. That would have been Mike Davis in Athens, I think. Wait, did Brandon Wilds not have 100 yards the next year in 2014 in Columbia? He did not?
No.
Wait, South Carolina sort of threw all over them that game.
Yep.
They threw on them in 2013. I don't know if I think 2011, Marcus.
So that's obviously a good guess with Marcus with that, 37 for 182. It was 2013.
Okay.
South Carolina lost that game 41-30, but Mike Davis 16 carries for 149 yards. Actually outplayed Todd Gurley.
Good Lord.
Todd Gurley 30 carries for 132. And our man Nick Jones had his best game as a Gamecock, 6 receptions, 97 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But Aaron Murray threw 4 touchdowns. South Carolina ended up losing. And, of course,
that was an entertaining game.
It was a very entertaining game. And it was, for South Carolina, unfortunately, one of 2 SEC losses that year. The other one, they could have survived the Georgia one. Georgia would go on to lose 3 SEC games that year. Auburn, Missouri, and one other. So South Carolina would have been easily in the SEC title game and lost, of course, Tennessee on the road. So, but yeah, that's the last time it happened. I went through and looked earlier. And Wes, honestly, a lot of and South Carolina's had wins, of course, against Georgia since 2013, but they've done it in other ways. Sometimes it's been uglier games or passing the ball or whatever, but that was the last time they did it. Marcus Lattimore, of course, did do it in 2011. Not sure about 12. I would think so too. I didn't look that one up, but man, some of the games they haven't even been close in terms of like they haven't gotten to 50 yards rushing. So the reason I was just kind of curious about that in light of some of Georgia's statistical, accomplishments this year on defense, especially the 2 rushing yards against Clemson. I was just kind of wondering, but South Carolina is going to have to create some more explosion in the run game and in the pass game. Again, tall order.
Travis asked, was that the game? Was that the year South Carolina lost to Mizzou because Spurrier did not go for 2? No, that was 2014 that South Carolina that was the year they were so bad on defense, but then actually played a really good game against Missouri for most of that game, and then went up 20-7 instead of 21-7, if I remember correctly. They could have gone for 2 and gone up 21-7, and they lost that game 21-20 because the defense collapsed late. Again, not to bring back bad memories or anything. So yeah, this Saturday, 7:00, ESPN. What else is there to say, Chris? What else we got, man? I know, first of all, you do need to tell everybody about Dead Soxy.
You literally, you read my mind or saw me doing something. Maybe you saw my eyes wandering there. But yes, we do need to tell everybody about Dead Soxy, which I'm glad to do. GamecockCentral.com is partnered with Dead Soxy once again for the 2021 football season. Go to deadsoxy.com, DEADSOXY.com, and just check out their catalog, guys, girls. They have men's and women's socks for all occasions. You can check out the college line. They've got a bunch of different college-themed socks, including some ones that, as a Gamecock fan, you might particularly like. Athletic socks, no-shows, dress socks, whatever you're looking for, they've got it at deadsoxy.com, and you can get 25% off your order with the promo code COCKY.
There you go. And there I go, not talking as I was muted. I realized at that time.
Yep.
John says Juju should be kickoff return man. What do y'all think? I agree. I think if the guy busts one the only time he's ever touched the ball, 63 yards, then yes. I'd give the guy another chance. Hey, can South Carolina find a special teams advantage in this game again this week? You got to imagine, first of all, Gamecock Twitter is going to love.
That's why I laughed, yeah.
Yeah, South Carolina, if it was a 70-point game, but South Carolina special teams got one over on Muschamp,
anything,
then,
any kind of
Gamecock Twitter is going to explode.
Yeah.
But you got it. Pete Limbo is like burning the midnight oil, going over every last inch of special teams film, trying to find an advantage in this game.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and that's an area that we've seen schematically. South Carolina's done a good job there in the first 2 games. Did they have better players on special teams compared to the competition first 2 weeks? Yes, I would still say that. But you also can just tell schematically. You can tell when guys are well coached in certain facets. And Georgia's going to present a big problem because their special teams, because of their team depth and their team speed, it's going to be a lot different. They're return teams, they're gunners. They've got a lot of speed there, and they've got some guys that are dangerous with the ball in their hands. But that is another area, Wes. I think you identify a few different things. Defensive line, can they make an impact? Special teams, can you find some type of edge there? And then offensively, can you get something that's just enough going there? I pointed in my keys to the game, Wes, to explosive plays. Not to get too off track, because I know we want to go back to special teams, but I do want to make that point. I think it's easy to go into this game and say, well, South Carolina's got to get the run game going against Georgia. If that happens, it's fantastic for this team, both for this game and maybe into the future. It springboards them onto something. But it's hard to envision this team or any team that Georgia faces just going up and down the field 75 yards and scoring touchdowns 4 times in a game. Statistically, that's tough to do anyway. Really tough against Georgia. So it seems like explosive plays are South Carolina's way to go. You got to limit them by Georgia. You need some offensively, however they come, and then an explosive play or two in special teams would certainly make a huge difference.
Yeah, because I look at it like this, man. When we start talking about keys to victory, and like you said, we had our article. It's like very easy to sit here on a podcast and be like, well, yeah, if South Carolina just wins the turnover battle by 3-0 or 4-1, then they'll have an excellent chance to win this. It's like, okay, but how do you do that?
Yeah,
like you have to force those. Like you have to cause it. To me, Chris, we know that South Carolina has a good defensive front. Like we know that South Carolina at least has a good defensive front. I think we're going to find out the next couple of weeks. Is it a good defensive front? Is it a very good? Is it a great? Is it an elite? We may sit there if South Carolina's defensive front just takes over again. Maybe Georgia's offense doesn't move the ball either. Like I still think they're going to have the talent. They're going to move the ball some. Georgia will, but are we sitting there saying these are 2 defensive lines that just took over this game, and it ends up being way more low scoring than anyone expects? Like that can happen. That does happen. Now, again, South Carolina is going to have to go make enough plays on offense, as you're talking about explosive plays. Dude, I go back to a guy that's we've been a huge Jaheim Bell fan club here on GC Live as far as his ability. The more I see Jaheim Bell play, the more I say that's the guy I'm trying to get the football to more in a variety of ways. Can you find some type of mismatch, with some of these guys we've talked about throughout the entire offseason? Can you find some type of mismatch to where you can find a consistent threat in the passing game and really get this offense going? Because I do – you hear people a lot of times if an offense is struggling, Chris, they always talk about identity. And they're always like, oh, this offense doesn't have an identity. And I'm like, that's just like something people repeat. Like I don't know if it like has a ton of I don't put a ton of credence into that. But if to me, South Carolina has not found yet on offense what they do hang their hat on. Like what do they major in? So – is it getting a guy like Bell more involved? Is it, if the running game is not there again, do you just say we're going to give the ball to 20, Kevin Harris, and let him try to wear this defense down and try to do what he did last year and just sort of try to over time chopping wood mentality where you're like, we're just going to let Kevin try to wear these guys down. I don't know. And none of the answers are probably good answers at this time. It's going to be difficult, But if you're South Carolina, you're just going to have found a little bit different approach and certainly better execution on offense than we have seen so far.
Yeah, better execution. And, Marcus Satterfield went over some of that on during his press opportunity earlier this week. And just kind of why have things not got on track. And some of the things you mentioned were very small things, missing a landmark here, 6 inches this way or that way. And those are small things for a low margin team offensively. But again, what I said earlier, those are going to be magnified tenfold against Georgia. So if you can get those corrected in this game and play with poise and composure, that's great. But you're going to have to do all the other things in terms of execution better too. And that's why I go to, it's going to be hard to execute, whether it's procedural stuff or just moving the ball, catch, pass and catch, making all your blocks, guys hitting the right hole. Like those things are going to be tough to do consistently against Georgia. And that's why I think they're going to have to flip the field with some explosive plays or even score on some explosive plays to have a chance to score enough plays to win. Now, can they do that? That's a question. And right now, you probably don't feel great based on what we've seen in games 1 and 2. You don't feel great about their chances to do that. but that is what it's going to take.
I agree. All right, so any final questions? I think we'll probably end it here shortly. If y'all do have any final questions, throw them in the chat. Chris, are you going to make the people wait for your final score prediction? Are you going to give your score prediction, or what you thinking, man?
I've kind of been going back and forth on that one, Wes, as far as, what this score line is. And it primarily relates to not really the margin, but how many points can South Carolina score. I think I'm going to go a little bit below what the line on this game has been, but I do think, Georgia just defensively, just too much. You don't feel good about South Carolina's ability to go score. So I'm going to say 31-13.
I dig it. I think, and I was put on the spot earlier, and I always keep my predictions consistent.
There you go.
I said 34-17 Georgia. So I mean, we're in the same. Would it surprise me if it was more like 34-10, 38-10, something like that? Not at all. But I'll stick with that. It's probably a little bit on the positive side, but Mark says we should do a 30-minute show before the game. I do have a little mini breakdown that will come out before every game. That is with me and our intern Kendall Smith. Trey wants to know what the team is wearing. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
So, well, no, I've been working on an additional uniform source. So. The problem is sometimes people move on, Chris, and also don't like to bother my football people with like, hey, what's the uniform this week?
Sure.
So I'm not putting this as like the official, unofficial report, but word on the street is that it's going to be the Stormtroopers again, all white.
Okay. So it's the unofficial.
It's the unofficial.
Unofficial.
Yeah.
Okay. So there
are we going to see a trend? Like, do you think Beamer's going to like just stick with
some of these teams that literally they have a home in a road?
Yeah. Huh? Maybe he didn't he mention some like superstitions every now and then or something like that? There was one thing where like he wore the same hat or he did something. I think in Oklahoma. So maybe they won in the red whites. Yeah, I think you wear it until you take an L and then you move on to the next.
There you go. Okay, there you go.
So Adam says, man, y'all don't believe in your own team. I mean, dude, we're being realistic as two people who are trying to provide you coverage of the team. Like, we're not going to sit here and pick South Carolina in every single game, especially when they're a 30-plus point road underdog. So, yeah. But, Stormtroopers is a good uni.
It is. So, somebody asked me, what uniform combo do you like? And I don't really get into it that much, but that was the one that I said I thought was probably their coolest uniform, in my opinion. People have a lot of different opinions about that.
Yeah, no doubt. We got a newbie here. Sam, what's up? Says, I finally found a Gamecock stream. Welcome in. He says, is it true that all the transfers have gutted this program? I wouldn't say it like that, man. I mean, I would say it like this is a rebuilding job. And Georgia is the number 2 team in the country for a reason. And dude, doesn't it seem like we've seen, not just at South Carolina, it seems like spreads have gotten bigger and bigger in general. Like, I'm not a gambler. Maybe if I'm completely off base, y'all tell me. But it just seems like spreads in college football, I think it's because offenses have gotten so good over the last 10 years or so that you see more and more big spreads, I feel like, because teams can just blow teams out. But then it seems like you see more and more games that have huge spreads where there's an upset in those games as well. So I don't know. I am not a gambler. I may be talking completely, about something I don't know about. But it just seems like there's been bigger and bigger spreads, more big spread games. But then more games of where there are big spreads and there's a big upset. So let's see. Do we got any more questions? Coleman says the spreads are absurd. I got a question for you, Chris, and for the chat.
Okay, let's hear it.
What makes South Carolina fans happy this week? If South Carolina loses this game but plays well, and then knowing there's this massive Kentucky game on the horizon, home game, night game, tailgating. By the way, last I checked, there are still tickets available. I know Carolina wants for this one to sell out. What makes you happy going into next week? Like, if you're a Carolina fan and Carolina loses by 10 but plays well, are you happy, or are you only happy with a win?
I would think fans would be happy with that, given the challenge that lies ahead, how good Georgia looks, especially defensively, year one of the Beamer era. Not saying that anybody needs to clap like the Auburn game that Spurrier got after the fans for, but if you play well and you acquit yourself well, nobody should expect to go in and win this game. If you do, as a Gamecock fan, expect to go beat Georgia, as in you're going to be mad if they lose and questioning the entire program and existence and everything like that, reset it a little bit, right? Recognize the circumstances here, recognize the context. But I would think people would be happy with that. If they look – I think here's something that I heard a lot, and it was funny because it shows a little bit of recency bias, Wes. You remember something we heard a lot over the past few years was that and there was some truth at times. Well, it's not just losing, it's losing and looking so bad. And Spurrier coach teams didn't do this or that. Well, you kind of forget some of the team, when they lost a game they weren't supposed to, or some of the oddball like coaching decisions, or some of the undisciplined stuff. Some people kind of forgot that because of what Spurrier ended up doing, right? But just a little sidebar there. I think that people are going to be happy if South Carolina looks competitive, right? That's something that was talked about the last few years. If you're going to lose to a really good team, okay, do it competitively. Look competitive. Play a clean game, right? Play hard. I think people would be happy with those things, or should be.
Yeah, should be. Now, and I think there are some fans that are going to be upset if you lose regardless, but is it like I'm mad for an hour and then I'm good, or is it that you're mad all week and mad about the future of the program and all this stuff? That, South Carolina could get beat by 50 on Saturday, and really it's kind of hard to put a ton on a staff that inherited the situation. So anyway, some people were saying only with a win on the chat. Most people were saying compete, play better, and then not have any injuries would be one thing that make a lot of people happy. So we'll see. It's always an opportunity. This is why you play the games. We'll all find out. Complete coverage on GamecockCentral.com. Colin Taylor will be in Athens. Our intern crew, Michael Sauls, Kendall Smith will be in Athens as well. And it'll be great coverage either way. And then Chris and I will be back on Monday to talk about this game and then look ahead to South Carolina versus Kentucky. So y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. Enjoy a good Saturday, hopefully, of college football. And we'll see you all on Monday.